Good evening. May the peace of Jesus be with all of us. In fact, this is pretty much our center of our talk tonight. When we talk about changing your stars, when we're talking about spiritual energy, we talk about God, we talk about Jesus, it is most of the times not easy to really understand and feel and take advantage of all of this. So we're going to use pretty much a very, the time permitting here. We have a very short time. I believe we're supposed to be done in 45 minutes, right? So the Apostle Paul is one of the most not just recognized figures of the New Testament, but he is responsible for us to be talking about the gospel today, disseminating Christianism throughout the world. So it wasn't always what he had in mind, and that's why our changing our stars, it's focused. So our objectives here is keeping blind faith and passions in check, and we're going to explain why. God's power through Jesus and the spiritual world. Love, forgiveness, and redemption. Using our talents, transforming ourselves and the world around us. So we're going to try to cover this, but I cannot do it on my own here. This is a fantastic book. I really, truly recommend it, especially if you wanted to know everything about Christianism, you want to know about Spiritism, you want to know about a fantastic work that was put together, was written by the Spirit Emmanuel, and it was channeled through Francisco Cândido Xavier, we call him Chico Xavier, and one of the greatest medium that we have in no longer with us in the spiritual world. But in this book, Emmanuel talks about the life of Paul and Stephen and their journeys. And it is so rich in details and it's so rich in history that, and it's very loyal to the New Testament. But it's just like, if you read the Bible, it's very limited in information. You would like to know, was Paul really, who were his family? Did he have like a fiancé, or did he have friends, or how was it, and how was his upbringing, and so on. It is like a journal, so very interesting. So we're going to start to, and what I'm going to try to do here with the help with, I have a video in YouTube. I'm going to play 3 pieces so we get a little bit of the dramatic of because it's so beautiful, the story, and I don't want it to make it so boring that just me talking here, so I use a little bit of the media resources here so you can kind of try to put yourself there. So his name was not Paul initially, it was Saul Tarsus. He had everything going for him. He was a Jewish man, he was a Pharisee, he was educated in Greece, he had the Greek philosophy, he had the knowledge, he had a Roman status, a Roman citizenship. So he was a decent-looking man, and he had a lot of financial power too, and he had a lot of influence. So he had everything, politically, financially, knowledge, status, recognition. So in life, he had it made. He was like just trailing through life. And as a Pharisee, I don't know if you remember, if you're very familiar with the New Testament and the gospel. The Pharisees were like deadly enemies of Jesus. And everything that Jesus was trying to bring in his message, there was always a Pharisee there or a Sadducee. Sadducee and Pharisees, they were both Jewish, but they were very orthodox in just keeping what in the law of Moses and it's not written in the law of Moses and Moses wrote the first 5 books in the Old Testament, and he makes the Torah, and there is more to the Torah, but this was known as the law. So if you didn't follow the law, you were a sinner and you were not complying to the standards of the Judaism, and therefore you should be punished. You're not part of it. So they had so Jesus was really an enemy, and even after Jesus had resurrected, Jesus had gone to the spiritual world. He left his 12 apostles, now 11 because Judas was not in. So he had Peter as the leader of the group, and they were known that the man of the way, and they were trying to do in a very humble way, preaching the gospel. But it was so difficult, and it was so incredibly hard. And there is Stephen, who was a Jew, that he was originally not necessarily a Christian, but he became a Christian. And he was, Paul had so much political status and so much religious power that he was like a prince, a rabbi, on what they call like a Sanhedrin. It was like the Jewish high court for religious, and it was like a connection. There was pretty much religion and their legislative law, because that's how it was, the custom back then. So it was like a mix of a man of the law and a man of the high religious law. So Paul was responsible for approving of the stoning of Stephen. Stephen was the first martyr of the Christianism. He was learned from Peter, and in the first works of the disciples, they were just bringing in all the sick people, all the needy, all people who are that were persecuted, and they were just helping them and they're preaching them. And he was so inspired, with the power of Jesus, that Stephen was already a healer, and he was condemned to be like doing witchcraft and a liar and a conspirer. So he was then judged, and he was stoned to death. So much was his faith that Stephen, and this is all in the book, Stephen could forgive everyone who were killing him, right? But Paul was so hard on Christianism because it was against everything that he believed, that he had the passion for God and he loved God, but it was what we call like a blind faith. So he had a mission that it was to promote what his faith was and to eliminate everyone that were their enemies. At this point, I will play a quick video that has a little, and forgive me, this video, it's a YouTube video. I mean, this is a movie about Paul's life. This part here is just to portray his fanatism. It has like it's in English. So never mind
Reuben is a pompous fool.
The word in here.
Not that. Chasing after these people because they believe differently than you.
That's what God wants.
How do you know?
They're teaching lies. Their Messiah is dead. They're taking advantage of our countrymen. The law preserves Israel. It must be followed at all cost.
People risk their lives by believing in Jesus. No one is being taken advantage of.
It is a play for power by a sect who lost their leader. Now they don't want to lose their position. They're making up lies.
They do miracles in his name.
But that's a positive sign of false teaching. Only God can perform miracles.
They say Jesus is God.
There's only one God.
What if you're wrong?
There's blood on my hands.
Okay, stop it here. There's blood in my hands. You see the passion? I select this. I thought it was, a nice movie. It's not 100% loyal to what is in the book. It's two different stuff, but it's pretty close to how it is in the New Testament. So he had a mission, and his mission was not just because he had a mission. He had this passion. He was led by that faith. That was his belief. That was his values. And what I like to do in my talks, in my reflections, I like to for us to be part of the story. So this happens to us often. Sometimes we think we have everything that we need. We have everything that we want. Very little is missing. And sometimes we think our values are it. We think we are in the right path, we have the right mission. And what happens is, if we're not open to change or to other views, other values, other possibilities, we could be blinded by that faith. So what happens to Saul? It's incredible. And this is how God shows himself. How sovereignly, how supreme his love for us, his power through us, on us, he helps. What happens here is that Jesus now, it's no longer in the picture. So those early, we call it the primitive Christians, all they have is their faith. Jesus is not around them no more, and they're preaching that their Messiah, our Messiah, has died, but he has risen and is now living in spirit, and he has given us all of these teachings and all of this power for us to find the kingdom of God, for us to live better lives, for us to understand why we are suffering, why this is all temporary. So how do we get healed? But it was incredibly difficult for them, not only because they're being persecuted by these forces, because they were like a very small group. So what does God do? Paul had already committed murders through power and through persecution. They were killing women and children. They didn't care. They were not following their faith. They were not following their values. They were enemies. So they were worth nothing. So they were just getting killed and eliminated. So that's a murderer. But at the same time, God sees us all the same. And he uses the worst that we have on us to bring the best that we have on us. We are born with talents. We are born with power. We use this power on ourselves. The way we use this power, it's our choice. That's why we have the freedom of choice, right? Free will, and so on. So, and that is the journey that we have, is to choose between good and bad, and to educate ourselves and to transform ourselves. And that's what happened to Paul. So now, blinded by the light. So continue our story here. Leaving us, going back to Paul here. He goes to Damascus now to to find and kill this man called Ananias. And Ananias was a Jewish man. First, their core persecution was like, we will find and we will put in their places those prominent Jews who are leading other Jewish to be astray from our faith, these new Christians. So they wanted to first, okay, you're saying you're a Christian, we want you to go back to Judaism or else. So you're going to be eliminated. And those who are leading people into the new Christian faith, they were just being persecuted. So he's going to Damascus, and he had authorization to continue his mission to just go and eliminate Ananias and everyone with him. And he was caught by surprise. And I think I'll play the video now so we have a little more dramatic. Because this has about 10 minutes, I'm just going to go to the select the scene. Okay? So now Paul has here a battalion here, and something is happening. I'll let you watch, and we'll discuss about it.
Persecuting me, Saul. Who are you? I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. Get up, enter the city of Damascus. You will be told what you are to do.
There. So what happens here? So Paul has a meeting with Jesus. Jesus, in his spirit, talks to Paul. Why are you persecuting me? Who are you? I'm Jesus. And what we the continuing the following words that comes is, why are you persecuting me? And then Paul asks him, what do you want from me, Lord? And then Jesus says, just go to Damascus and you will be led to what you need to do. So he's blinded for 3 days. So from that battalion that he has, those friends, there is just one that stays with him. He just dismissed everybody else. They thought he went crazy because he was talking with the shadows. It was like he was crying a lot, and he was not confused because he knew exactly that he was talking to Jesus, but nobody could understand how that was possible and what was going on. So he was in a state of redemption, but at the same time he was confused because he didn't know what exactly Jesus wanted from him. But he was 100% sure that he had a meeting with Jesus. So next he's going to meet Ananias, and Ananias is this good man who actually has healing powers. And Ananias had a dream that the man that comes to persecute him is actually a chosen one, a man that he needs to help. So they sent Ananias to heal Paul. So I think I'm going to just play this because then we get done with the video because it's the last part. And what happens here is the beginning of his transformation. And take from here on. Okay.
That's the house across the street. Yes. Ananias,
So here
one
comes
last
Ananias.
time, I'm pleading with you. Barnabas, I have to do this. God told me to do this. Please.
So this is Barnabas, and he says, "Are you crazy? This guy comes to kill you, and you're gonna go to meet him?" I said, "No, I had a vision. God talked to me. He says I have to go and heal him. I have to. He's been chosen. He needs my help right now, and I'm gonna do what God told me to do."
Ananias!
Saul, a man is here to see you.
My name is Ananias. Yes.
You know this man?
Yes. I had a vision. A man named Ananias came into this room. He laid his hands on me, and I could see again. Jesus sent him.
Jesus.
You have been chosen.
Chosen?
Saul! Saul!
God told me that you are the instrument he has chosen to bring his name before the Gentiles.
Can you let me see again?
The Lord Jesus, who appeared to you on your way here, has sent me so that you might regain your sight and be filled with the Holy Spirit.
I can see.
Okay. So now Paul can see, right? What do you want from me, Lord? So Jesus is using people to be like his agents, his brokers, right? I don't need to tell you, because between us and Jesus, it appears that there is so much distance, but it's just how we approach Jesus and how we understand his power, how we can communicate with Jesus, because we're talking about prayers, and the power of prayers is powerful. If you wanted to talk to Jesus or to any good spirit or any entity that you love, you just use the power of prayer. And this is what Jesus, and that's what's the talent that Paul had. I don't know if you're familiar with the parable of the talents in the gospel that Jesus teaches. There were a very rich man who had trusted employees, and they work in his farm and in his business, and they were very trusted, and he needed to go for a very long trip that would take him a long time to come back, but he needed to trust his employees to make some investments, so when he came back, he would continue the business as it was. So he gave one of the employees 5 talents. Let's say that the foreign talent is money, okay? Not talent. You can use it in the metaphor with the talent as our, ability to do everything, perform things, but talent is money. So let's do like a conversion, say like a talent is worth $100,000, right? Let's do like a crazy conversion. So he gave this employee 5 talents, like $500,000. The other one he gave 3 talents, and the other one he only gave 1 talent. So, and he went, trusting you guys with my net worth, my fortune. When I come back, I expect you guys to have done well with it. So, when he comes back, he finds the one that had 3 talents. He multiplied. He says, "Here, Lord. Here's your 3 talents. I was able to invest it, and I gained in interest and all of that good stuff. I double your talents. Here, he had 5 talents. Now here 10 talents. And his Lord is so pleased. He says, "That's a good servant. You done well, because you have multiplied the talents. Not only that, I will also multiply your own talents." And the one that had 3 talents did the same. "Here, Lord, I'm redeeming and surrendering 6 talents, because I was able to also work hard with that money, and I invested, and I did this, I did that, and I was able to give you back double of the talents you have." And he says, "Oh, the Lord was very pleased. Very good servant, very loyal servant, and you did good. Because you did that, not only that you're going to keep those talents that I give you, but you're going to have a double also." And the third employee says, "Lord, I know that you reap where you did not sow. I know that you're a very hard man, and I was concerned that I could have lost your talent. I could have wasted. So I buried your talent. I hid your talent, so nothing would happen to it. And here's your talent back." So he gives back his 1 talent. And he says, You're telling me that you were afraid to have lost the talent, but I gave you, I trust you. You're supposed to have done something with it. So not only that you're going to lose, you're not going to get any talent, but everything that you have, I'm going to take it away. So, because it's a parable, there is a symbolism. If we apply to our lives, for instance, I'm using here a little more personal explanation of the parable. So we enter this world with what? How do we enter the world? Naked, right? Just with our lives, naked. We got nothing, right? The life that we enter with is not even ours. It's a borrowing. The message we're trying to relay here is that we always borrowing from God. We don't own it. We have arrived in a family because of their love, and they wanted to have us because God was there to make sure we would happen. So it's a borrowing. But we have a talent. What we do with our lives it's that talent. We're going to need to give back when we come out and we go back to where we came from, right? So we're going to need to return those talents. And if we have lived a life that we were so afraid, we were so fixed in just not doing anything, not trying to improve, do better, do good, we have done nothing with that talent. So we're going to live this life, and we're going to return that life to God without having done anything much for it, like a mediocre kind of life. And this is really not what the purpose of our life is, because we are trying to live here better than we came in. What we have in our Constitution, right? Or what is our most sacred right? Freedom and the pursuit of happiness. The pursuit of happiness. This is inserted in us. The pursuit of happiness. Our founding fathers of our country here has that, because it was inserted then, and they knew even in a constitution we have that, because that is a God's right. That's a birthright. That's a human right to have and a goal. We have to have purpose to pursue happiness. So what happened here with Paul, it's incredible. But he now has a mission. So Paul has, for instance, he had 5 talents. He was one of those, had the most talents. But he was doing everything wrong. He wasn't using his talent. He was wasting everything. He was doing all the wrong stuff. And God says, oh, wait a minute. Jesus waking him up. You're going the wrong way, my son. Go this way. We just need, you're in the wrong route. Just listen to what I'm saying with your heart. Make changes, and you are going to do everything that you're supposed to do. So Paul goes to the desert and stays there for 3 years. That was Ananias' word advice to him. He was like, what do I do now? And he says, maybe you have to find some peace, and you have to find yourself inside of you. That's what we call the inner reform. You need to find yourself, know who you are. And we need to do that often in our lives. Sometimes we're going in such a way that we don't have time to stop and to think about everything that's happening in our lives. We need to go to a desert sometimes. Why do we need to? And symbolically, because the desert has loneliness, and we have our weaknesses exposed. However, we have guardian angels shining the way. I'll stop here. What happens to Paul, going back to the book, in his prayers, he was now Jesus gave him a mission, and he was constantly in prayer with Jesus, and he wanted to know what he does, how things will happen, how am I going to preach the gospel to all the Gentiles, how am I going to do this? He says, don't worry. You're going to have guardian angels. You're going to have guidance. Those guardian angels, you know who they were? Stephen and his sister, Abigail. Abigail was his fiancée, and Stephen was his brother-in-law. So he had killed his brother-in-law, and he had lost his fiancée, and they're in the spiritual world. And now they are Paul's mentors, spiritual mentors. And it's amazing that he was so ashamed. And it's like the power of forgiveness. The power of forgiveness. Not only that God forgave him and changed his course and his transformation, all that he needed was his heart, because, like I mentioned before, he had a passion for God. And the first commandment, which is love your God with all your mind, all your heart, all your power. He had that. So much that was a passion. But they're just deviated from that. And, the Pharisee was just fixated with everything, that it was just in those 5 books and their tradition and all. And they lived with Jesus, and they missed the biggest law that Jesus said, the law of love. And Jesus said in one of his teachings, what are the biggest commandment that Moses left? He said that to one of the Pharisees. And love your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your power. And he says, very good. And the second one is just as big as this one. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. In these 2 commandments, they're all the law and all the prophets. So if you just live for loving God and loving your neighbor as you love yourself. So we have to love ourselves too. That's it. Everything is just summarizing that. So the Pharisees missed that, because how could they love the Romans who are their enemies? It's hard to love your enemy, right? Love your neighbor, it means love everybody. So it was a very, very, very difficult journey. But now God is using Paul to make a change. The king of not the king, the prince of these Pharisees, the one who were persecuting the Christians, now he's the biggest defender. He's the biggest preacher and the missionary. So he goes to the desert, and in one night, Stephen and Abigail comes to him, and he's in the state of confusion. I don't know what to do. Everybody had abandoned me. I don't know. I'm hated. People want to kill me now because I show up in the synagogues and I start preaching that Jesus appeared to me, that, I have to preach this to the Gentiles, and I want to save all the Jews. I want to bring all Jews to Christianism. And they want to just kill me. Somebody could just say, it's just karma. But they said to him, you need to love, you need to wait, you need to work hard, and you have to forgive. So those 5 words here: love, wait, work, and forgive. I said 5, but it's 4. This is what kept him going, and that's how he transformed himself and was able to do everything that he could. Have an idea of the accomplishments of the drive and endurance that Paul had. The New Testament has 27 books. 14 of those are Paul's. 14. And those all letters that he wrote to the churches. So he went to communities. Churches was not really churches as we know today. It was just like went to families, to homes, and they start talking about the gospel, preaching the gospel, and bringing about the spirit of Jesus, the spirit of love, the spirit of charity, fraternity, solidarity. So in those little houses, that was spreading with so much love and so much power that they became little churches. And within time, they grew into go over the community, and everybody had that inspiration to preach the gospel and to spread the gospel. So that's Paul. So he went, and at one time, he had 4 major travels. And he went from Asia Minor, which is currently like the Middle East. He went to Europe. He went back to Jerusalem. He went to many, many places, little island, little countries, places of nowhere. They didn't even have Judaism there. So he was preaching to the Gentiles and to the Romans especially. And he was very talented in doing that because he had wisdom, he had knowledge, and he was living a life that he had testified transformation. But faith, pain, and the fruits of hard labor. So nothing without pain, nothing without hard work. And what transforming faith means? I'll tell you 2 things that is in the... Jesus told Paul what he should do. And I'm going to read here because that was in the book. I did not memorize that. Because that's why Paul wrote 14 letters. Some of the letters he wrote twice to the Corinthians and Thessalonians and Timothy. And Paul was having a conversation with Jesus, and he says, Lord, the work is so big. I have been to many places, and, I have planted the fruits of, growing the gospel, and I see that there is a lot of confusion. There is this community that the Jewish want to keep the old tradition. They want to mix with Christianism, and it's hard. So what do I do? And that's why Jesus says, just write. We cannot be in too many places at the same time. Just write. And he says why he should write these letters. The value of the task at hand is not in the missionary's physical presence, but the spiritual content of his verb, of his example, and of his life. And that's what he did. And when Paul went to these places, he wrote to the second letter to the Corinthians about his suffering. I'm going to read real fast. You can look at the Corinthians 12:23. He says the following, because when he went back to Corinth, which is a place now, it's called it's in Turkey now, but it's a very prominent place there. When he came back to the same church that he had started there, he was finding like people were changing everything. They were saying that they knew the gospel better than Paul, and so on and so on. And he says, do they have anything to show? What is their record? I'm not here to boast about myself, about being the apostle of the Gentiles, but I'll tell you a few things that happened to me that gives me the right to tell who's right or wrong here. And he says the following: I have worked much harder, been in prison more frequently, being flogged more severely, and being exposed to death again and again. 24 times I received from the Jews 40 lashes minus 1. 3 times I was beaten with rods, and once I was pelted with stones. 3 times I was shipwrecked. I spent a night and a day in an open sea, and I have been constantly on the move. I have been in danger from rivers, in danger from bandits, in danger from my fellow Jews, in danger from the Gentiles, in danger in the city, in danger in the country, in danger in the sea, and in danger from false believers. I have labored and toiled, and I have often gone without sleep. I have gone hunger and thirst, and have often gone without food. And so on, so on, so on, so on. So, one of the things that Jesus left for his disciples what to do in preaching the gospel, in order for him to be present, he says to all his disciples, you go and you preach the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven to everyone. But when you go, you take nothing. Just a sandal. Don't take no money. Don't take a second pair of clothes. Just go as you are, with your cape and nothing extra. No extra food. Just go like this. And so they went. And they went to deserts. They went to wild places. And they were exposed to go to the desert. You have no water. You have no food. What's going to happen? What's going to happen if... You're going to die, right? It's obvious. You're going to die. But what happens then once you are in that situation? You have to plead for a higher power to help you, right? You don't want to die. It wouldn't make sense for you to go to be a missionary and go under those circumstances. It is because the message is that you give your life to God. The rest, you live in your spirit. Once we are able to give ourselves, our physical life, when we can take away what we are in flesh and we live in our spirit, we can be in communion with God. Once we can live in our spirit, we can receive the message more clear. I can know what to do better. And that's what's an invitation for all of us. As much as we live in our flesh, in our bodies, we're not able to enjoy everything that we're entitled to and is there waiting for us. An example was like this very, very wise monk was teaching his disciple in the top of a mountain. They were there for like 10 years, and the disciple was going to graduate, right? And he needed to go through this test in order for him to graduate. 10 years with this very wise monk, and he was ready to graduate and go to his mission. And he says, I need you, we're both going to silence ourselves completely. I want you to isolate all the noise that there is outside, and I want you to tell me what you hear after you isolate all the noise. I wanted the deepest, the more pure, more sublime kind of perception you can bring me. So they did that. So a few minutes passed, and then the teacher says, so what you hear? He says, teacher, I heard this buzzing. I was able to, I froze everything, and I was able to hear this little buzzing. There was a little fly flying right close to us. And I was able to hear perfectly. And the master says, you felt. So, I'll tell you how you felt. If you were able to isolate everything, and I ask you to bring me what you hear, which is more pure, more sublime. If you cannot hear your own heart pulsing inside of you, making that noise, that was the noise I was expecting. Because if you close the outside, you just have what's inside. So that is how we live in our spirit. So his suffering moved mountains, and this is a very famous Philippians 4:13, very famous thought and reflection. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That was Paul. And he also wrote, do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. Whoever sows to please their flesh, from the flesh will reap destruction. Whoever sows to please the Spirit, from the Spirit will reap eternal life. Let's not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap the harvest if we do not give up. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let's do good to all people, especially those who belong to the family of believers. That's in Galatians. And our takeaways here to conclude our talk. So life is eternal if lived in the Spirit. Suffering is temporary and brings us closer to our feelings and spiritual values. Thus, we can use it into our advantage and not for complaints and victimization. We're never alone. I recently had like influenza. It was terrible, right? When we're sick and then we feel good, don't we feel like different? It's not like we feel so grateful that we're... Imagine if we felt like we had a bad cold, like everything is aching in your body, everything. Imagine if we had that every day. And just once in a while we felt good, but every day was just like that terrible feeling. Doesn't God love us so much that He wants us to be happy? Imagine if we gone through that. So when I was like shivering, shaking, I was like aching terribly. And it was nothing compared to many people who really suffering in pain and disease. But it was a bad time. I was going through a rocky time. I was like, and I started to pray. And I pray so humbly, so purely in the sense of like, I felt that I was really talking to God. And I asked for forgiveness. I asked for, please help me, God, and this and this and that. Immediately, my shivering stopped. And I sense, didn't hear very clear, but I sense something saying to me like this: don't worry. Don't need to be desperate. We're here. So it's like my prayer was not just heard, but there was some calming effect that happened just because I was so... I had ignored everything else that was material, and I was like, in my suffering, I was living, I was talking from the bottom of my heart. When we say the bottom of our heart, it's the bottom of our spirit, really. And it was amazing. God gives unconditional forgiveness and love. Why don't we do the same? Isn't Paul's the perfect example? The worst enemy, God could forgive and transform. Because if God didn't forgive him, who was a murderer, and you know, and if you don't have this unconditional love and forgiveness, it's literally impossible to live a life and try to pursue happiness. Let's not borrow our talents, as we will reap what we sow. Jesus is the path, the truth, and the life. And that's why Jesus says, no one can go through God without going through me. I'm the path. because when we say God, it's so, it seems like difficult for us to even visualize God and having his power. But then there is Jesus. Jesus is not just a historical figure. He lives in spirit. We're talking about Jesus today, 2,000 years ago, because of his power, because of his gospel. He lives in the gospel. He lives through all of the examples of lives that touch our hearts and touch our hearts every day. We can change the past, but certainly can start our transformation today and change the future. I believe that Gandhi said that. And that's so true. The secret to accomplish our mission: love, patience, work, discipline, right? And forgiveness. And to finish, final, this is in the Spirit's book. This is by Allan Kardec, a commentary on question number 921. He who is perfectly sure that the future life is a reality, regard his corporeal life as being merely a traveler's moment, halting a wayside inn, and easily consoles himself for the passing annoyances of a journey, which is bringing him in a new, happier position that will be all the more satisfactory in proportion to the completeness of the preparations he has made for entering upon it. Just like, in short, if we have this hope, this faith, this love that there is a better life, there is this future life that is waiting for us, all the happiness that we have. So we can go through the troubles, we can go through the pain, we can go through the sufferings. It's only transitory. It will pass. The most important thing is learning from it, having our peace of mind, doing all the best we can do, and being in communion with this beautiful energy that we have, that we created through love. That's all I have, folks. Thank you so much for your patience, and have a good night.
Thank you so much, Valdo. It's much appreciated. Just a couple of points that I thought about as we watched this tonight. This last slide, really, if we had to summarize this in one word, what would it be? Any thoughts? Reincarnation, right? This life we're living, the life that Paul led way back when, right? That one life that he led was his opportunity to grow and evolve. Our life right now, today, this life is our opportunity to grow and evolve. We don't have to necessarily have the vision like Saul. We don't necessarily have to go around the world and proclaim our beliefs and what have you, but in our own personal way, in our own personal existence, simply transform in the sense that we devote ourselves to the real life, the spiritual life, in the sense that each day we try a little bit harder to emulate the example that Valdo shared with us on this last slide, right? Jesus is the path, the truth, and the life. That doesn't mean, like a lot of mainstream religions or Christianity in general, where they say you have to be saved or born again in that sense, or baptized by water, right? That doesn't mean that, to us anyways, to Spiritism. It simply means that in our own personal transformation, at every opportunity, that we do our best to follow the example that Christ gave us when he walked the earth, right? The way he lived, the way he acted, the way he forgave, the way he performed charity, the way he tried to help at every possible moment. Make sense? Awesome. So, on that note, let's prepare for passes. I'm going to do a guided meditation to kind of get us there. I'll ask that we just put on some vibration type music. Luz, thank you. Your job now is to relax. The lecture's over. We're going to meditate just a little bit. When we're done, we'll have a pass and leave here prepared for a new week. So, using tonight's topic as our